Before we start, understand this. Most decisions people regret weren't made because they lacked information. They were made because someone rushed them. Pressure doesn't create clarity. It creates compliance. I'm Steve Koleno, top producing real estate agent, industry disruptor, and someone who spent years inside the systems most consumers never get to see. This isn't a show about motivation. It's not about tactics, and it's not about selling you anything. This is about slowing the conversation down, exposing incentives, and removing the hidden risk that shows up when decisions are made too fast. Welcome to Confidential Remarks. Before we talk about pricing, marketing, or timing, I want to start with the decision that quietly shapes everything that follows: choosing your real estate agent. Most sellers believe they approach this decision one way. The data tells us they usually approach it another way entirely. Tonight is about understanding that reality, not to judge it, but to use it to your advantage so you can make a smarter, more confident decision when the time comes. Tonight is about understanding that reality, not to judge it, but to use it to your advantage so you can make a smarter, more confident decision when the time comes. If you've done any reading online or talked to friends who've sold before, you've probably heard the same advice. Interview at least 3 agents, compare commission rates, review marketing plans, treat it like a formal hiring process. And honestly, that advice isn't wrong. On paper, it's exactly how a major financial decision should be handled. But here's what actually happens. 97% of sellers hire the first or second agent they talk to. That's almost everyone. 1 or 2 conversations and the decision is made. If you've sold before, this may feel very familiar. And if you haven't, it's important to know this pattern exists before you find yourself in it. When we look closer, most sellers hire the very first agent they contact. A smaller group hires the second, and only a tiny percentage interview 3 or more agents. What's interesting is that this pattern holds across different price points, neighborhoods, and age groups. It's not about being careless, it's about how humans naturally make decisions under stress. For most sellers, that first meeting isn't really an interview, it's a confirmation. A friend, neighbor, or family member has already said, "You should call this person." So the meeting becomes less about comparison and more about reassurance. You're checking that the agent feels professional, trustworthy, and competent. Once that box is checked, the search often ends. 3 forces drive this behavior. First, referrals transfer trust instantly. Second, sellers care more about honesty and reputation than flashy presentations. Once trust feels solid, there's little motivation to keep shopping. And third, selling a home is stressful. Choosing an agent feels like progress. It reduces anxiety, even if the choice hasn't been fully compared. A referral doesn't just give you a name. It gives you confidence borrowed from someone else. Someone you trust has already decided this agent did a good job for them. That shortcut feels safe, and often it is. But it also means you may skip asking questions that could reveal meaningful differences between agents. Here's where this really matters. Most sellers assume that as long as the agent is competent, the outcome will be similar. But the biggest risk isn't about whether an agent is good or bad. It's about differences in strategy. Pricing, negotiation, and marketing decisions vary more than most sellers expect, and those differences have real financial consequences. Even small differences add up quickly. A slightly different pricing strategy can change your result by tens of thousands of dollars. Commission structures vary, negotiation approaches matter. When you combine these factors, the total impact can easily exceed $50,000 on a typical home sale. That's why this decision deserves just a little more structure than most sellers give it. The solution isn't to turn this into a long, exhausting process. It's simply to be intentional. Understanding how most sellers behave gives you the chance to slow things down just enough to make a more informed choice without adding stress or complexity. A SMART framework can be very simple. Talk to at least 3 agents, even if one comes highly recommended. Ask each to explain their pricing strategy, not just the number. Compare marketing plans in writing. Understand commission options. And look at recent relevant sales, not just testimonials. These steps don't take weeks, they take intention. The 97% statistic isn't a warning, it's awareness. Once you recognize how trust and stress influence decisions, you can choose to act differently. A few extra conversations, guided by the right questions, can dramatically improve your outcome. Informed decisions consistently outperform default ones. The most successful sellers aren't the ones who spend weeks interviewing agents. They're the ones who ask the right questions of 2 or 3 carefully chosen professionals. It's not about doing more work. It's about making the work you do count. Here's what matters. Influence isn't the problem. Persuasion isn't the problem. Risk is. Risk appears when choice is narrowed, when urgency replaces understanding, when someone else decides what you are allowed to consider. Confidential remarks exists to do the opposite, to slow decisions down, to widen choice, to give you enough context to decide for yourself. I'm Steve Koleno, and if this episode helped you see something more clearly, share it with someone who values clarity over pressure. Because the moment you control the pace, you control the outcome. This is Confidential Remarks.